example, from Saudi Arabia, 50,000 of trainees, men and women, are really great data. Now, I'm going to ask our third panelist, Ms. Mary Ann Hennessey, very well known to Bosnia and Herzegovina society, to give some practical examples of education problems in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I had thought to spend my introductory 5 minutes talking about the kinds of policy tools and recommendations, pedagogical and curricular innovations, European fora and mechanisms for quality, mobility, and comparability of education and qualifications that the Council of Europe has developed over the years in order to support education for a shared Europe of shared values. Recent contributions include an interactive e-book on shared histories for a Europe without dividing lines, the Council of Europe Charter on Education for Democratic Citizenship and Human Rights Education, the Committee of Ministers' recommendation on ensuring quality education, the European language portfolio, and very soon, a new promising model of competencies required for democratic culture and intercultural dialogue. I will be happy to talk further about any of these and more, but when I think about our topic, education as a building block of shared societies and values, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, I'm afraid that those may seem rather like hanging up decorations to hide the holes in the wall. I think that very few people would disagree that today, the education systems in Bosnia and Herzegovina do not adequately serve the education needs of individual citizens or produce the informed and productive citizens needed by the society as a whole. Chronic, systemic problems include fragmentation of authority for policy and administration, leading to overregulation and underregulation at the same time. Insufficient resources that are inefficiently spent, leading to scarcity and waste at the same time, and the list is yet long. But at the heart of the matter is this: Bosnia and Herzegovina is educating its population for a divided society, impoverished in the economic sense as well as in a value sense. And it is difficult to see that as simply an accidental or inadvertent byproduct of constitutional structures or inadequate legislation. Education is a complex process, and Bosnia and Herzegovina is a complex state. However, the bottom line is quite simple. Shared societies can't be built alone. Mutual commitment to each other and to the future, effective communication, and acting in the common interest are what distinguish between a shared society of the all for one for all type, or of the you have your share, I have my share type. In BiH, there is a lack of consensus on the role of education, on the knowledge, skills, and values it should transmit, and on whose interests it should serve. There are no shared priorities for the development of education, from local communities up to the state institutions. A cooperative space or mechanism for effective communication, debate, or agreement about what the different stakeholders want to put into or get out of education would help. But even those fora with the potential for this, conferences of ministers of education, of university rectors, and the public agencies for education, are all so far proving inadequate and are already contested on several levels. Education policies and priorities are being set, when they are set at all, at a parochial level, serving the needs of collectives, ethnic, linguistic, partisan, or territorial, and all but ignoring the needs of individual learners and graduates, or of the society as a whole. In the absence of effective enforcement of international and constitutional protections, some very visible forms of discrimination, segregation, and other violations of children's and families' fundamental rights persist for decades, while new ones are also being introduced. At the end of the day, teach what you like, but children will learn what they see and what they live. But yes, education can be the foundation stone or the building blocks of this country's construction of a stable European democracy and a competitive economy capable of integrating the European Union. There must first be, however, a more than just rhetorical commitment to that shared ambition. followed by genuine communication and dedication to work together in a spirit of compromise focused on achieving that shared goal. Now, if a consensus for implementing education reform were to be found, I believe that quality and equity would be the most salient and urgent keywords for that reform process. By quality, I imply modernizing of teaching and learning in contents and in methods, but also not shying away from addressing the needs and values of a sustainably democratic society: citizenship, tolerance, independent critical thinking. These are issues which in Bosnia and Herzegovina were never directly addressed, and that is certainly due to the interruption of the natural post-socialist transition process by war, by international intervention, and also by the unfinished consolidation of the post-war democracy. By equity, I imply ensuring access to education equally for all, without discrimination or segregation, and in full respect of the diversity of languages, of cultures, of abilities and backgrounds of the learners in this country. It's not rocket science, but it's worth saying. We could speculate whether the lack of a common political vision for society, of cohesive democratic values, is to blame for the shortcomings of Bosnia and Herzegovina education, or whether a poorly and politically designed, rather outdated and under-resourced education system is to blame for the shortcomings in societal cohesion, shared values, and political vision. But of course, both are true. It's a chicken and egg scenario. More important, though, is how to put this scenario into reverse, so that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, shared values, education, and a peaceful and prosperous society are all mutually reinforcing. Today, I have more questions than answers, and I'm going to ask a few of them now. Does there exist a general recognition in society that the current arrangements for education in Bosnia and Herzegovina are not delivering desired results or value for money? If there is, can that recognition be a starting point for grassroots, bottom-up pressure for large-scale system reforms? Could education be a strong enough motivator for more successful and cross-community sustained popular demand for reform than we have seen so far? Can consensus be achieved on the expected role and purpose of education, on the knowledge, skills, and values it should transmit, and whose interests it should serve? Could such a consensus overcome the strong centrifugal instincts to protect acquired competencies, powers, which have presented most of the obstacles so far? 20 years after Dayton, with very few examples of real consensus-based countrywide reforms, could education be significantly reformed without domestic political consensus? Is it realistic to impose reforms without this consensus? We have one pretty successful example in Brčko district, but also perhaps many more unsuccessful examples. And is it realistic even to expect the OHR or any part of international community to do so? Is it worthwhile to independently implement hopefully similar reforms in smaller units, as was suggested, in the country, hoping it could provide positive models to follow and would not affect mobility or transferability or employability too much? You have some examples, some positive examples, such as multilingual classroom work in Brčko district, Republika Srpska with its human rights education modules at certain grade levels, and several cantons who are experimenting now with external matura and with new non-religion option courses for the religious class. There are reforms going on at those different levels, but there's not necessarily a domino effect or a role model effect coming from those. A very important question is, who would take on these tasks? Who, at which level of authority, would take on the responsibility, the risks of actually identifying and implementing those reforms? And how to identify and support those policymakers who are ready, willing, and able to take the political responsibility and act upon it? Some other questions I have are, considering the ongoing demographic trend of diminishing numbers of school pupils? Could this be an opportunity for structural and curricular reforms, including through competition or concentration of resources to improve quality, increase access, rather than just an opportunity to cut budgets? And in the context of the hoped-for EU-guided public sector finance reforms, can education be prioritized? Could new transparent funding mechanisms for education be introduced to fund educational processes and policies, incentivize good practices, target public funding to real needs instead of the traditional budget user approach? And finally, we know that the breeding grounds for extremism and radicalization lie in social exclusion, unemployment, poverty, intolerance, and the inability to see the good or the similarities between one's own and other groups. How to ensure that education in Bosnia and Herzegovina does not perpetuate these dangers, but contributes to eradicating them? Seen in this light, education reform in this country is a matter of self-interest for the whole of Europe. And to conclude, I'd like to quote a few lines from the address of the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Torbjörn Jagland, to the UN Security Council Counterterrorism Committee just last week. In Europe, this is what he said, in Europe, while most states have some form of civic education, we don't, as a standard practice, teach our children what it means explicitly to be a democratic citizen, how to live with others as equals in mixed societies. We are not born with our democratic abilities, we learn them. Democracies are not God-given, they are man-made, and they need to be constantly maintained. Can students resolve conflicts by understanding the different perspectives of each party? Do they grasp the inalienable nature of certain rights and their relationship with religious beliefs? Are they able to work with peers who do not share their views? If we believe in our democratic principles, then let us stand by them. It is not about teaching young people what to think, it's about teaching them how to think, and only the extremists should be afraid of that. Thank you for your attention.